Running a call center is tough. Leading a sales team is a challenge. Luckily, your hosts know what it takes to succeed. What you can expect from your two guides? Conversations that won't be overly scripted, definitely not salesy or boring, just filled with as much value as possible. Each week, Jason and Oliver will bring you topics to help scale your team, increase profits, and actually feel like you are winning. So, if you are ready to up your game and become the best in the business, tune in, take notes, and be prepared to learn. And here they are with another episode of Call Center Confidence. It's Jason Cutter and Oliver Catt.
What's going on, Oliver? How are you? Happy Wednesday. Happy Wednesday, everyone tuning in live. Here we go. Week 13.
Absolutely. Jason, how you doing? Happy Wednesday. You good?
I am good. I'm excited for people tuning in the first time, may not know the evolution of how far we've come with that intro and what that represents. For any longtime listeners, longtime viewers, they know that we are constantly trying to improve, working on new things, new stuff. That intro, first time playing that video, awesome. Anyone listening to the podcast version, make sure to check it out online. Super happy with how that came out. Your handiwork there. So.
And yours. Hey, look, we're moving and grooving, and we're bringing new things to the table every single week. It's what's going to be on the table next.
Next is going to be the podcast. So if you're listening to this, then it's already happened. If you're watching this live or watching the replay the next week, then get ready to hear about the podcast. Subscribe. That will be coming out in the next week. Which, of course, if you want those updates, make sure to go to callcenterconfidence.com. Your link, I'll beat you to it. If you want to sign up for the reminders, make sure before we dive into it, go to lu.ma, so Luma, Luma, /callcenterconfidence, or just go to callcenterconfidence.com, which has all the links, all the info. Watch these live, watch the replays, get caught up, reach out to us, email us, find us on social media.
Hey, you're making me panic now. I'm like, hang on a minute. Did I put last week's episode on the website? I can't remember now. I need to check that.
Well, by the time anyone else notices, it will be there, I'm sure. So lots of good stuff, lots of interesting things. And of course, and I'll beat you to this too, because this is fun, because I already know what you're going to say now that we've done 12 weeks of this, is that we do this to help the community. We're doing this to give information out there, to provide whatever value we can. As someone like Gary Vee would say, give away the best stuff for free that we can, just to help the community. Obviously, there's ways that we both help organizations, individuals, call centers. So if you're interested in some help, email us, or if you got questions, email us. You can just do info@callcenterconfidence.com, or you can email either of us, Jason or Oliver or find us on social media. So, did I cover all of your normal topics?
You went through the list. We're just going to have a checklist on the left-hand side now so we can get through that. So, there's so much to discuss, so much to chalk off the list, and so much to discuss because, we've gone through it now. As we say, week 13, we are really kind of getting into the nitty-gritty. And hopefully we're helping every single buddy out there learning and moving with what we're trying to do, and hopefully giving you the tools and the tips to succeed. So where are we heading today, Jason? What are we doing? I think we're going fresh today, right?
We're going a little fresh. We're starting out with a new topic in our evolution and cycle. We're going to talk about performance improvement plans. So if you're watching this, if you're listening live, make sure to put in chat. If you're watching the replay, either LinkedIn or YouTube, Facebook, you can also put chats in there too. We'll see that as you interact with it. But let us know you're here, where you're calling, where you're listening from. I keep wanting to say calling, where you're listening from, and what questions, topics you have. So here's the deal. This is a scenario we've all dealt with, is you hire somebody who seems very promising. They're going to be amazing. They're going to be a perfect fit. They said all the right things in the interview, right? Then you put them through your onboarding, which we covered in detail. Your training, you covered in detail. You got them through the nest. You put them on your sales floor. You followed everything we said to do about being a great coach and mentor and leader, not just a micromanaging manager, right? And you did all that. And it still isn't working. And they're not hitting the numbers they need. So then it becomes time for a decision. So it's the performance improvement plan, if you have one in place and it's structured, which we'll talk about, or it's the unofficial double secret probation, which is either you do better, or I'm going to fire you, and you just might not know it's coming because I've just completely given up on you, and then everywhere in between. So Oliver, what do you think about performance improvement plans and whatever name they're called in organizations, right? That not a disciplinary, but like a roadmap to get someone back to where you want them to be. What do you think about when you hear those, and what's the connotation in most organizations you worked with?
See, for me, I think there's always certain negativity around all the acronyms with PIPs and PDPs and disciplinaries. I don't know, I'm losing track here. But as you say, what's my thoughts? In my opinion, there is two. And I would always go down the route of saying you have your PDP, which is your personal development plan or performance development plan, however you want to say it. And you have your PIP, which is your performance improvement plan. The way I would look at it is twofold, and don't get confused between the two, because development is, where do you want to develop yourself? It's an area of development. What do you want to add? And the improvement plan is, where are you now and where do you want to be? Now, again, a lot of companies use these in different ways. So personal development plans are usually used in management, leadership, coaching sessions, whereas improvement plans are put into place when somebody isn't necessarily succeeding in what they're trying to do. So, are they hitting targets? Are they hitting KPIs? Are they hitting their metrics? And you'd usually put those in place to manage somebody more to the line, so that you can either manage them to get them to a disciplinary, or I can't even say the word disciplinary, or some kind of coaching session that you'd have to make sure that they're actually able to do their job. Now, a lot of companies, especially who have employment law, would have to use improvement plans to ensure that they've done all they can do from the business standpoint to make sure somebody's doing their job correctly. So there's two on the table. We're going to go into the kind of nitty gritty for each one. And Jason, do you have anything else you want to add to those two from your opinions that you've seen?
No, I think that's a great place to start, because that personal or professional development plan, that's what I would put under like business development coaching, personal, professional coaching. I did this thing. I had started it years ago. And then when I worked at an organization, I actually did this with a bunch of the leaders in the organization, that some of them weren't even under me directly in the org chart. I just offered it because it was fun and I could do it. It was called Coaching with Cutter. And what I would do is we would just set milestones and goals, and what did they want to work on personally or professionally. And that was a positive. It's like, what is your goal in the business, in your life, health, whatever it is? Let's set some goals. Let's meet, once every other week for the next 6 months, and I'll just hold you accountable, right? There's that kind of like, here's that plan. So that's on the positive. That's the, hey, this is great. I have something I want to accomplish. And then there's just a general negative connotation around the personal improvement plan, or whatever that is, that makes people feel like they just got called into the principal's office and now they're in trouble, right?
Yeah, nobody wants that. It's the same way when I used to hate it whenever I was either on the phones or I worked in the call center, and my manager would be like, Oliver, can you just come over here for a minute? You'd be like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? What have I done wrong now? And then, hey, as we're all out there, I guarantee every single one of you, when you get called to the boss's office, that's the first thing that goes through your head. It's like you start flash thinking every single thing that you've done wrong, and you think, which one have I been caught on? That's the worst feeling in the world.
I love it.
No, I don't like that. So, okay, let's start with the simple stuff, because this is the stuff that people can do from a coaching perspective. This is people that they can do from a leadership perspective about helping your team get from A to B. And this isn't the the improvement side of things for your metrics. This is the fun stuff. How you get your team developing, firing on all cylinders, and doing what they need to do. So from a development plan, we're going to cover off kind of where you need to go, how you set goals, targets, and objectives, and kind of what you need to do to make sure that you're consistent with it and your team is consistent with that development opportunity to go X, Y, Z, or wherever they want to go in the business. So, Jason, from your opinion, what do you feel that is necessary for a leader to put in place to ensure a development plan is followed?
You know, depending on which way you're going with this, I mean, I think fundamentally, and we talked about this before, as a leader of leading anybody, you have to know what that person wants and why. And then you have to make things about them and set up the goals and the accountability or the roadmap for them, not just yourself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's key. 100% that's key, because if you don't put a roadmap in place, if you don't put, timelines, directions, support structures in place, nobody's ever going to develop. And that's something what a great leader, in my opinion, goes out there and does. So when they sit down with their person, they're coaching, I'll be like, okay, Jason, so look, this is where you are now. This isn't something that you're being metriced on or marked on or scored on. You want to go from agent, for example, to a team leader, to a supervisor. You want to go from a supervisor to a team leader or a team manager, whatever those positions in different structures and different call centers have. Everybody has different names for it, right? So how do we get from A to B? What do we need to do? What's the roadmap? What's the journey? And for me, it's about putting things in there that if I was that manager, if they want to come and take my role, it's great, because not only am I helping them achieve that, I'm also creating a succession plan, which means for me, I can move up. A lot of companies I work with in the past don't like to promote within until somebody else is ready to take the reins underneath you. And that's something that a lot of great companies follow these days, because then they know that team's being left in comfortable hands and everybody can kind of get on with what they're doing. So for me, it's about putting those milestones in, as you say. So, if you want to become a supervisor, it's about putting in there, X amount of time following and shadowing an existing manager, working on coaching and feedback forms, working on development plans with other people, and kind of going down that route. Now, I'm not saying specifically that is the role, that is the journey we're taking, because it depends on whatever role you want to move into or where you want to develop to. But I think it's important, as you said, to have those directions in place. And if you don't, it can fall very short. Do you agree with that one?
Yeah, I think without the plan, and I think one of the big keys too, and this is where I see these kind of plans struggle and fail, is where the organization wants it to happen. So the manager says, I want to backfill behind me. We want to move somebody up. I want to make sure I have somebody on deck so that my boss who's asking me to move up, like I can fill that in. And so a lot of times from above to below, there's the plan. And then what happens is reaching out to somebody or picking who is going to be a part of that plan, and then dictating the roadmap and laying out the roadmap, but not getting their buy-in or ensuring that they also want that roadmap. Hey, Oliver, I want to take a trip from California to New York. And here's what we're going to do. And you being like, yeah, I don't really want to take that trip, or I don't really want to go that direction. Right. I'd rather go to Seattle. Right. And so is that person on board, and are they excited? Do they want to do that roadmap? Yeah, no, absolutely. Buy-in is key. Buy-in is crucial, because if you are not bought into what you're trying to do or what you're trying to do for your team, then it doesn't work. And that goes back to sales. It goes back to the same message in any call center job, any leadership role, any management role. If you do not have the buy-in, then people are not going to walk that walk with you. And I think that's the key thing to remember here. And that goes a long way, a very long way, in my opinion. Yeah. So with that in mind, then, so let's say that somebody is on board. They do want to move into that position, right? And then so that you put this development plan in place. Where do you see the line between what the organization should supply and the resources they should be giving, the coaching, the mentoring, the training, internal, external, third-party coaching, things like that, versus how much the responsibility is on that individual who wants to move up and wants to be on the road, and like how much you should expect them to do under their own kind of momentum, and then how much should be provided to them.
Okay, I'm probably not going to be liked by the comment I'm going to make for anybody listening out there, especially people that are wanting to move up. I am a firm believer of do the job before you get paid for it and promoted into the job. I've had people that have been managers for 6 months, but still being paid an agent salary because they're on secondment. Everybody loves that word, secondment, to that role.
What is that word? Never heard that word.
Have you not? Okay, so second, it's a big word in the UK. Everybody uses it. So, I'm going to second you over here, or second you over here. And what it would mean is, like, for example, Jason, let's say you're on the phones and we've got a management position available, but we don't know what we're going to do with that management position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to second you from your role and put you into this role for an undetermined amount of time, or somebody may actually say for 6 months. But what it would mean is usually you're staying on the same salary, the same commission structure, the same bonus that you were on. Your title doesn't really change. You're kind of that acting manager, but you're still earning agent commission or agent salary and things like that. And it's basically just kind of a lot of way of temporarily putting people into a position without putting them into a position. And it happens a lot in the UK. I remember it happened a lot in the BPO sector when I worked for a number of different BPOs. And I've seen it happen whilst working from my side, from a consultant side as well, where people will come and say, oh, look, I've been in this position for 6 months now. Should I say that I want the job permanently, or do I just shut my mouth and move back? And I'm like, well, wow, it's up to you. But it happens. I don't know from the US side if you've seen that at all. Maybe employment law is different. I don't know.
I don't know if it's so much the employment law as it is an expectation. And again, this isn't a conversation just about, let's say, millennials who can be, the finger pointed at them and that. I think I've seen it across all groups, but in sales organizations, especially if you're asking a salesperson to be doing some kind of additional role or task that is then impeding their ability to make money or hit their goals, then they want to be paid for it, right? If you're supposed to be selling and now you're doing a lot of management or training and you can't hit your numbers to make all the money that you want to make through your performance compensation plan, most salespeople will only tolerate that for a little bit, unless they are not a very good salesperson that's not performing anyway. Then they're happy to do something else and take the pressure off of what they're not doing in sales. Okay. So in the US, it's like wait, you want me to be a team lead or a supervisor and I won't have time to sell? Like, okay, what are you going to pay me? Like, what am I going to get as a bonus or commission for that?
Do you know what? I mean, that's the world throughout. I mean, that happens a lot wherever I've worked. And to give you an idea and an example, most companies, specifically in the UK, and two call centers that I remembered perfectly well for doing this, would actually go into the meeting ahead of time to that person, to that sales rep, and say, hey, we want you to do this. This is what we're paying you, because it's coming. And normally in most circumstances, and for those of you that aren't in this boat, please don't shoot the messenger. Usually it would be kind of like, your base salary plus the last 3 months of your average commission. And that would be what you're paid whilst you're in this place. That would normally be what is done. But when I say put in the role without being paid for it, is you would be put into the role without the official team leader salary or manager salary, manager bonus structure. That's how it would work. That was kind of my explanation. I apologize if it didn't come across that way.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where a lot of companies will try and get away with it, because if you know that you're about to give somebody a big pay rise for the job that they're in, if you can hold it off for 6 months especially in a BPO, it's done. That happens in the industry. It still happens to this day. I witnessed it with a client only 4 or 5 months ago. So it's still done to this day, and it's not something to be frowned upon. And like I said, this is why I think people are going to hate me for saying this. I am a firm believer of doing the job before you get the job, especially if you're doing an internal promotion. That has been me. I've been there. When I first took on my first training manager's role, I was put into that position last minute by my HR director, who turned around and said, hey, this is what you're going to do. This is what you're moving into. But you're staying as you are, but you're now in control. Okay. And then it took me, I don't know, 3 or 4 months before I plucked up the courage at this point to speak to my then site director and say, hey, look, I've been doing this role now for like 3 or 4 months. Do you plan to keep me in this role? Am I going back to what I'm doing? I'm not being compensated for it. And it wasn't a bonus role. It was just a standard base salary at that point. So from my perspective, I earned the right to do that job that I got moved into. Again, happened in the job after that as well. So for me, by having somebody who's got a development plan already in place and going back to where we're trying to go with this is do the job. Go in there with experience. Put that on your development roadmap. And if you've got that person's buy-in, say, hey, look, come in out of hours. And that's usually a question or a comment that people hate is like, stick around for an extra hour after your shift on the phones and shadow the manager for an hour. Stick around for an extra hour and come into our management meeting so that you can understand what we're doing. Because I've witnessed new team leaders get promoted into that position and gone, wow, I didn't know it was this stressful. Mm-hmm. Wow, I didn't know we had to do that. What do you mean I've got to jump on a conference call and give my opinion on why agents do this, and this? We didn't know that you had to do this when we were on the phones. We didn't know that you had all of these meetings and all of these conference calls. And for me, you set somebody's expectations right, you get a lot more from them off the bat because they are ready to develop themselves when they get into that role. What do you think of that?
I think that's so true. I think there's always a lot about a position that people don't see that's done behind the scenes or done out of sight where you think it's easy. Oh, it's easy to be a team lead. It's easy to be a supervisor. Oh, it's easy to be a sales manager, right? They just sit in their office all day and yell at people every once in a while to close more deals or hand out cash or gift cards or, post up the stats every day. Right? It seems like they just sit in there and hang out, right? And most people don't realize what happens. And yes, I've also known some sales managers who that's what they do. And I've actually taken their office away from them and put them in a cube because they just hide in their office instead of managing. Yes.
That winds me up. It honestly, it winds me up. And as far as I'm concerned, you have an office to do your meetings. You have an office to do your private and confidential work. Team managers, call center managers, supervisors, sales coaches, trainers, sit on the floor. Sorry, ran over.
That's it. All right.
And I know
Noted.
That's an unpopular comment.
Noted, but it's also true, right? I mean, it's depending on your position in the organization, you want to be as close to the front lines or your people as possible, right? If you're the general in the war, yes, you're 20,000, 30,000 foot view, you're back. You need to see the whole battlefield, right? The CEO, the VP of sales, they've got to see the whole battlefield. Those managers you mentioned, you want to be in it. So a lot of people just don't see that. They don't see how much work goes into it, right? Think of kids, right? Kids think parenting's easy. Oh, it must be so nice. You just go to a job and then you just hang out like, oh, okay. Yeah. And that's why most kids are like, I can't wait to grow up so I can get a job and have money and be an adult. Oh, okay, good. See how different that is from being a kid. And I think that's what happens a lot where salespeople are like, oh, team lead seems easy, right? You're just hanging out and helping people close deals. And it's not that it's harder, it's just different. And I love your point of which it's a tryout. It's a trial. You also want to see it. And when I've seen people who feel entitled to it and they raise their hand and it's like, I should have this position. And then they get into it and they don't realize it, then that causes issues versus, hey, I want to do this position. Let me try it out. Let me shadow you. Let me see what it's like. Let me try it. Let me put in the effort first. Then it makes a big difference. And, I think there's a responsibility though, too, to both sides, which is the person who wants to move into that new role on their development plan is how much effort do they need to put into it? That's their responsibility. And then also from a company perspective, how much support are they willing to give? Not financially. I mean, like training, professional development, personal development, coaching, getting a coach, assigning a mentor, putting them through training and workshops, instead of what we've talked about many times, which is assuming, oh, they were a good team lead, they'll be a good manager, right? Again, it's a different skill. It's a different set of tasks.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I mean, to give you an example, something that I actually set up for a company a couple of years ago was a management development program. And it wasn't something that, you kind of go to and you kind of tick a box and you're done and you're dusted. It was an ongoing thing. But instead of it being the whole theory, it was more practical. And I think this is where companies can benefit from, especially from a development standpoint, if you want to develop managers, is putting something like this in place. And it's really easy to do. I mean, don't get me wrong. You have to be consistent with it. You have to follow protocol. You have to make sure that everybody is doing the same thing. But what you are doing, you are preparing your team to go into that role. And it isn't just, this is what you need to do as a team leader. This is how you manage people. That is part of it. That's part of the training that I do. And it's part of one of the content pieces that I do, which is, it's called Buddy to Boss. So it's that transitional piece. And we spoke about that in week 1 and 2, if I can jump back 3 months.
So. Yeah.
But what this program was let's sit down and let's go through every stage of that development that you're going to need, so that when you do that role, fair enough, if you're not given training when you're in that role, that's on your managers, that's on everyone else. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these markers in place that you are going to follow to make sure you're ready when that position or when that time comes. So we did things like interview skills. What are the things that you need to know in a manager's or team leaders or supervisors interview that you're going to get asked? Now, we weren't arming them with the answers, but we were preparing them. So we were doing mock role play interview sessions. We were doing reporting. We were doing conference call etiquette, things like that. Email etiquette, writing etiquette. I mean, I laugh because I worked for a company where I emailed out the managers one day, and this new manager who'd been in the position a couple of months put on their out of office. And I mean, everybody does it. So I'm not just talking about one person. I've seen it in different companies, but I remember, and I'm paraphrasing here, it was like, hey, I'm currently out of the office, sunning myself on a beach with a cocktail. I'll be back in 2 weeks. Please contact this person. I'm thinking, you're in a corporate environment and you're telling me you're on a beach having a cocktail. I'm like, okay, yeah, there's fun. There's light-hearted, but imagine an external client gets that.
Yeah.
Imagine somebody that you're selling for, especially in an outsourced environment, gets that. And your client gets your team leaders out of office and goes, so who's in charge then? Why don't I know that they're on holiday?
Yeah.
Awkward. So there's a lot of things. So there was all different markers, and it was part of like a 10-session program. But that's a really good thing to implement across your business, across your company. And again, Jason and I, we can help with that if that's something you're interested in. But we can put something like that in place that your team can run. And the good thing about it is it's a simple process to follow, because there was workbooks involved, there was notes involved, so that when you turn up to your interview, you say, hey, look, I've done this amount of shadowing, I've done this amount of support. There's a lot of things you can kind of add to that from a development buy-in standpoint. I mean, what do you think of that, Jason?
So I think all of that is super important. I think one of the biggest takeaways from this, and then, let's talk about the dark side of the plans, the other plan that we want to talk about, is I think these are super important to have. Professional development plans. Also, another topic we were going to talk about, and we'll cover it in future weeks, but succession planning, things like, okay, so here is a plan, documented as much as possible, that people know the blueprint of what's possible. So you're an agent today. If you hit these milestones, or you achieve these goals, or you're here for this much time, you can move up. Here's kind of the pathways that are available to give the people who want to move up or around that roadmap and that hope that they're not just going to be an agent for life, and that the company cares and will support them. Some people may not choose that. They just want to be an agent, a salesperson. They're happy with that. That's where they're most effective, which is great. And that's fine. Others will want to test the waters and move it up. So when you have this and you can structure it and let people know, interview process, recruiting process, onboarding process, training, like let people know, like we have a structure. Here's the options. Here's what we will do. Here's what we expect if you want to do that.
Yeah.
If you can do that up front, it's great. Obviously, it's also got to be a part of your company culture, your corporate culture, where it fits with who you are and you supporting people to grow and improve and go through like the workshops and the stuff that you mentioned is a part of the culture, and a culture that's based around learning, development, growth, and things like that. So that's super important. And in my opinion, it's very important to have that, which if we look at it, like that's the positive, that's the carrot, that's like where people could go. And then, that helps kind of offset the performance improvement plan, which is you're not succeeding, you're not hitting your metrics, you're not hitting where you want. If it's always just the stick, it's always negative, like the only option is either you hit your metrics or you're in trouble, that's not good. And that will not have a long-lasting culture. That's a positive like work environment. But if you're doing great, here's what's available, money or moving up. If you're not doing great, we're going to support you, but here's the other option. Then it's really giving people a choice on the whole spectrum, and not like either you're here or you're gone. There's like this success thing, like what you're talking about.
Yeah. No, I like that. And I mean, to be fair, I've got nothing else to add to that, because I think the way you kind of summarized that and put that in place was perfect. So looking at the dark side, looking at the flip side, and the piece that a lot of people don't like to do because it creates difficult conversations. It creates awkward situations sometimes because people aren't able to convey what they want to convey. And this is part of the continuing development, continuing education. And I want to be clear about the personal improvement plan, that I think the way we look at this is negatively. It's looked upon negatively. As far as I'm concerned, I still think this is a development tool with more structure. And that's how this needs to be conveyed to your team. It's the same way a disciplinary is. Yes, it is. Don't get me wrong. Disciplinary is, you're being pulled in for a meeting or an investigation about something you've done wrong. But again, it's a learning tool. It's for somebody to come out of that disciplinary and have learned not to do it again. Now, don't get me wrong, somebody who's done something severely bad, who's being dismissed from the business, that's a different story. But when you're pulling somebody in for a warning, or when you're pulling somebody in for a written warning, it's all part of the development. And I want to be clear with that. And that is exactly what the performance improvement plan is. It's a development tool with more instructions behind it. Do you agree?
Yeah. And here's the tip for anybody watching this, listening to this. Here's the key that I've learned as a best practice is, just like I just mentioned with the development plans, succession plans, and the roadmap of where people could go that you would mention in the interview process, recruiting, onboarding, training, nesting, and continue to mention and give people that option, is when it's done properly, there's also the expectation that's set with people that, hey, here's performance. This is a sales organization. This is a business. This is a performance-based role. Right? Like you have to perform, and there's clear metrics, and there's the guidelines, and there's the rules of the game for winning and not winning. And the more you can mention that up front, such that you make the performance improvement plan, even the meeting and the conversation around it, something that they understand if it happens where you're coming from, which hopefully your goal is to help them improve. Right. That's why it's a performance improvement plan, because I'd rather you improve and get back on track and be successful than let you go, because that doesn't do us any good. But the more you can set that expectation throughout so that it's not a surprise, because what doesn't work is 3 months into someone's employment, next thing you know, they're getting called into the manager's office, and the manager's like, all right, you're not hitting your numbers. We need to put you on this thing. Here's HR. They're going to talk about it. Or I need you to sign this document that says, you have 2 weeks or 30 days to improve. And then it's, then that's just so negative.
Yeah.
And again, this is the biggest line I've told many people all the time is we want you to succeed as a salesperson. We need you to succeed. If you're not winning, the company's not winning. So the goal isn't to make you not win or sabotage you or fire you and find someone else. I would rather you win. I want you to succeed, and I want to coach you back to that. Right?
Yeah. And I think that's a great point. But on the reverse, or as we said earlier, the flip side, there are a lot of people that use this tool to their advantage to manage people out of the business. And I think that's what gives it the negative connotation is there are some people that abuse this performance plan because, do you know what? I don't like Jason. So Jason's not his target. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put Jason on a personal improvement plan or a performance improvement plan. And what we're going to do is we're going to monitor him very closely. We're going to make these metrics so tight, there's no margin for error. Then in 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whenever that timeline is up and he hasn't hit those numbers because we know he's going to struggle achieving them, we can go, sayonara, see you later. That is an abuse of the performance improvement plan. If you don't like somebody, if somebody's not working, there are other ways to manage people out of the business. This is the development tool. This is the difficult conversation that we want to give you tips and techniques on how you do this the right way. And I think, Jason, you summed it up perfectly with saying, we want you to succeed. We want you to improve. And it needs to be done not by HR. It's the management team. It's the sales support team. It's the sales leaders, because we want you to succeed. And as you said, if you're not succeeding, the business is not succeeding. So,
yeah.
Okay, so let's picture ourselves. I'm going to put you on the spot with a question, right? We're heading into this type of meeting. You know what you've got to do to me. You're going to put me on a performance improvement plan because I'm not hitting my sales numbers. I'm not delivering as I should. So we head into that meeting from an expectation standpoint, because I think it's clear that we have to set expectations in these meetings. All right. It's not about being nervous and conveying what you want to convey and how you do it, because that's up to you. We can give you tips and tricks on what to say and how to say it. But ultimately, you got to get the right message across. From an expectation standpoint, what tips would you give everybody else listening if you're heading into a meeting with me because I'm not hitting my sales numbers, that you would set ground rules going in there to say, hey, look, this is what it is. Be clear and concise. This is what we're going to do and why we're going to do it. What advice would you give out there?
Well, the biggest thing in the advice would be about the advice to be done well in advance of that is, in my opinion and experience, going into a meeting where somebody, let's say you in this case, is going to have a sit down with me about your numbers where you're going to get a performance improvement plan, that should never come as a surprise. That should never be something that blindsides you. Like, I'm doing great. I think I'm doing great. No one's told me otherwise. I'm showing up every day. I think I'm doing okay. And then all of a sudden there's a meeting and a bunch of people and they're being serious and they're telling me I'm not doing well and I have 4 weeks to fix it, right? That should never happen. If that happens, in my opinion, that means you failed as a leader and a manager and an organization of ensuring that A, people knew what their metrics were, and B, what the targets were, and then B, what the actuals were constantly, right? Maybe that's weekly, maybe it's daily, maybe it's hourly, like depending on the game that you're playing with your sales and your sales cycle. Every person should know exactly where they're at relative to the game. If you and I are playing checkers, we look down at the board. We both know how we're doing, right? If you have lots of pieces and I have 2 pieces, I know what we're doing. I know how it could go. It shouldn't be a surprise if it goes really bad. And I see a lot of organizations where it's just a mystery. It's a black box. The stats aren't obvious, and there's no constant updates. There's no constant coaching. There's no constant performance metrics and reviews on a regular basis saying, here's where you're at. Here's where you need to be at. Let me help you and coach you. I think that's the biggest thing. When somebody sits down for one of that meetings, it should not be a surprise that the meeting is happening.
I could not agree with you more, and I think that's really great. And I want to touch on a couple of points you said there, and everybody kind of think about this when you're doing your leadership techniques, how you're sending out information, or whatever it is you do to support your team, wherever in the hierarchy you sit, because I think it's important. The way you communicate that this meeting should not be a surprise is sending out your daily stats, weekly stats, monthly stats, highlighting where people are succeeding and not succeeding, and then having follow-up conversations. And I think that is something, as you say, you failed at this point as a leader. If you get to that point and you haven't done that, for me, you need to be able to evidence this as you go through it. So if I was heading into that meeting with Jason to say, hey, Jason, I'm going to put you on a performance improvement plan, he would have known for the last 5-10 days, or what, I mean, 10 days may be too drastic, I don't know, but say 5 days at least, that I've been sending out my daily sales numbers to the team, whether it individually or group, and I'm highlighting green for well done, I'm highlighting red for not so great, but then I'm following that up with a conversation. I'm saying, hey Jason, look, the last 3 days here, look, you've not hit your numbers. Why is that? Talk to me. Have a conversation. Maybe the fourth day you have another conversation. Then the fifth day, actually, you know what? He said, look, you got next week to get this, or we're going to be going into an improvement plan process or something. Set the tone. And I think you nailed it right on there, Jason, with that. It should never come as a shock. I think for me, the times that I've seen it come as a shock is when it hasn't been sales agents that haven't had the metrics. It's been people that work within a HR environment or a training environment where, and me, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. You've always got to put a number back down to it, where certain managers haven't put metrics in place to manage their team because they're not a number producing team. So for me, I think that is when it does come as a shock to some employees, because they're sat there having those conversations going, but I do this on a daily basis. I do that on a daily basis. Yeah, well, you're not doing it the way I like it to be. It's kind of you can't justify or quantify why those people are going into those meetings. And I think that's a difficult one, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think the goal of the performance improvement plan is to help someone improve. The backbone of it, in my opinion, is to remove the subjectivity and make it objective, right?
Yes.
Instead of the I don't like you, you're not performing in the areas where we want or need, or we all agreed you would perform as your role. Right. So I think that's one of the big keys. And unfortunately, you're talking about it. I would like to argue against it, but you mentioned it earlier about how when used improperly, it's used by companies and leaders who know they want to get rid of somebody, but they've got to do it in a certain way. And so they use it and they make it difficult. I, spend most of my career managing in California, which have to document everything. And so it's like, not that it was always, we want to get rid of this person, but we want to get rid of this person because they're not performing. And we got to make sure that we give them the chance to succeed and then have a paper trail so they can't say, oh, they didn't like me, but give them a chance. It was still ultimately a chance, but I've seen that used before. I've also managed in some states where you don't have to do that. And it's like, just if you want to get rid of somebody, you just do it instantly and mail them a check. So it just depends on where you're at. But I think the biggest key too, and this is where both setting the expectations for somebody's role and for the performance improvement plan is this one reminder, which a lot of people forget, is that people can't control results. They can only control activities and actions, right? I, as much as I want to, as a salesperson, cannot control how many sales I'm going to make today, right? I can't control if 2 or 3 people will buy from me today if I'm in a sales role, right? What I can control is the amount of calls that I make, or the amount of time I'm on the phone, or the amount of outreach I do, and trusting that formula equals the number of sales. If following a process, if I have the skills that I need. And so one of the big keys with performance improvement plans and accountability and management is, yes, I want you to do goals. Like, let's say I need you to close, you should be closing 2 deals a day, but working back from that, you can't control 2 deals a day, right? I can coach you, but I got to know you, like, how many calls are you making? What's your talk time? What's your after call work handling time? Like, are you spending most of the day putting in notes instead of making calls? Are you spending most of your time taking breaks and procrastinating instead of doing what you're doing? And then that's what the performance improvement plan is, right? So like if I was helping you get in better shape at the gym, we wouldn't say, here, I need you to lose this much weight. It's, I need you to come 5 days a week. We're going to spend 45 minutes a day. We're going to do this much exercise. We're going to do this, this, and this, because that's all we can control.
Yep.
And so the performance improvement plan is really, I need you to close 2 deals a day. Good luck. It's, okay, we said 100 calls a day. You're making 20. Let's talk about that. Like, what are you doing? And then all the other metrics.
No, 100%. And like productivity plays a massive key part in that. You know, again, if you can't measure productivity to turn around and say, hey, look, out of your 8-hour day, you spent 1 hour on the phone. No wonder you're not getting 2 deals a day.
Correct.
And that's it. And again, this goes back down to all the targets, the KPIs and the metrics we've talked when it comes to onboarding, training, recruitment, leadership. You know, setting expectations from the off is key. And when people are going into these improvement plans, make sure you can evidence everything and you can talk about everything. And remember, when you go in, these types of conversations isn't opinion. It's not thought. You've got to go in there with fact. You've got to go in there with information. I've seen leaders, and this is a big tip for anybody out there. If you don't go in there with fact and your agent starts questioning you about something and say, hey, well, look, you know, actually, do you know what? Yeah, I had only got an hour on the phone because the reason being I spoke to IT and I've got 7 hours worth of downtime because my phone number didn't work. Right. All of a sudden you look like an absolute fool because you've not thought of, not everything, because nobody can think of everything. But when you go in there, make sure you go in there with as much knowledge as possible. You need to know the answer to every question before you even ask it.
Yeah. And it only takes one of those meetings to learn to always check all of that, right? To look at the productivity, but then also hours worked and then what other dispositions they might have. Because it might be, oh yeah, I had a doctor's appointment and I never came back and I worked an hour and a half that day, but I spent an hour on the phone and I closed 1 deal. It's like, okay, that's winning, right? Good job. But if I don't know that, then I look really bad.
Yeah.
And so, yes, you got to cover all your bases. I see a lot of managers who just jump the gun and just assume like these numbers are bad. What are you doing, or why aren't you doing what you should be doing, instead of like looking at the whole picture and pulling all the details. I think the other part, and this is key, that I've always done, and you've got to do it in the right way, just like sales. You mentioned this early on. It's like, just like sales, just like anything else, you have to have buy-in, and you have to say this with the proper tone so it's not defensive in the same way you would do in sales. But in that performance improvement plan conversation, one of the things I always ask is, are you happy here? And do you want to be here? Like, is this something you want to be here, stay at, and succeed? Or do you not want to be a part of this? And you've got to say it in the right tone. You have to have the right relationship. You have to be empathetic, but also a leader and supportive in that, and say it in the right way, instead of like, hey, Oliver, so what, do you want to even be here at all? Like, that's just gross. And same thing with sales. Like, what do you mean you need to think about it? Like, what is there to think about? Like, that's just also gross. But just check in, because sometimes the activities that people aren't putting in is just the outward manifestation of that they not happy, that they don't want to be there. And the performance improvement plan is just going to be even more painful, instead of a heart-to-heart conversation, which is, do you want to be here? And if they say yes, great. I want you to be here as well. Here's the roadmap. Let's go.
I love it. I couldn't have said better myself.
Tell me, so I'm curious, Oliver, because we're agreeing a lot on this, a lot of great content.
Yeah.
Tell me, do you have any things that come to mind, any stories, any times where you've done an improvement plan or coached someone to give out a performance improvement plan, and like a horror story, or if you want a success story, or when it worked out? Like, I don't know. I feel like you've got to have some stories out there.
Yeah, no, I've got a few. I've got a few that I've implemented. I've got a few that I supported and helped other managers implement to do it. And actually, do you know what? To be fair, I want to talk about this actually, because this is something that people need to be aware of, right? I worked for a company where they put a manager on a performance improvement. I can't even speak today.
It's all right.
They put a manager, they put a team leader supervisor on a performance improvement plan. Now, first of all, when you are putting a leader on a performance improvement plan, you've already got a problem.
Yes.
Right? You've already got a problem if you are putting a manager on a performance improvement plan. So you need to sit back and circle around and go, well, why am I doing this? Why am I putting somebody who is in charge of people, in charge of sales? What are they not doing? Why am I not managing them correctly? Now, again, this boils down to not bad management skills, but maybe you are doing something wrong. Maybe you're not pulling this person up when they need to be pulled up, or maybe you're just, missing something. But this specific team that I worked with put a supervisor, manager on a performance improvement plan. They set metrics, they set targets, but again, what targets do you set? What metrics do you set? Because are you setting the team's metrics so that he has to motivate the team and inspire the team? Or are you setting him targets and goals? And this is where it kind of gets a little bit tricky and a little bit dirty if you don't do it the right way. Anyway, said manager was put on an improvement plan. The metrics and the targets that they put in place, he achieved. He had a 2-week window to turn it around, and guess what? He turned it around. But then after that improvement plan finished, went back into a rut again. Mm-hmm. Now, that's a difficult situation because all of a sudden, again, it boils back down to what is that person's manager doing or not doing for this person to be failing at whatever it is they're failing at. And again, is it team support? Is it team motivation? Is it sales numbers? Is it driving sales? Again, what are you putting on your manager? I always look at it like this. When you're looking at a manager of a sports team, a hockey team, a football team, American football team, or football to the Americans that are watching, or soccer team to the Americans that are watching football, it's confusing. But this is the problem. When a player messes up, whose fault is it in that kind of sporting environment? Is it the player? Is it the coach? Is it the manager? And it's really difficult because sometimes, more often than not, when an individual on a team loses performance or performance goes down, it's their fault. That person is disciplined. That person is managed. But is it actually the manager's fault for allowing that to happen in the first place? It's a very long-winded and intricate way of doing it. But most companies in that instance, especially in things like football, soccer, whatever it might be, will turn around if their team is not performing and actually fire the manager because they want new blood to come into that environment. So again, when we are putting a manager on an improvement plan, what has gone that wrong? Where has it broken down that we've had to do that? I mean, Jason, I don't know if you've seen a manager be put on a performance plan before. Where do you think? I've done it myself. Where do you think the breakdown's coming? I mean, okay, you've done it yourself. So has the breakdown come from your leadership team, your leadership skills? Is it them? What do you think?
So I think going to your sports analogy and example, which I've thought about a lot, and it's interesting because so like let's say basketball, big fan of basketball. It's easy too because there's 12 players on the team, 5 players on the court. It's pretty clear if one person's messing it up or who might be messing it up at the time, right? I think the biggest thing, and where the coach gets fired, the manager gets fired, somebody like that, where they're in trouble, is where it's not working and they're not improving it and they're not fixing that dynamic. Now, there's times where superstars are calling the shots and the superstars like, hey, by the way, like, I don't like this coach and we're not winning because of them. And they point the finger. And then the back office and the owners fire a coach because they listen to the superstars, which happens in sales teams as well. I've seen owners literally jump over the managers. They're talking to the superstar salesperson because they see where the revenue is coming from. That person tells them what they like and don't like about managers. And then people's heads get put on the chopping block or the list of the problem, right? Like, we'd be doing better if it wasn't for Bob. Bob's a bad manager. We'd be winning, right? And they may or may not be listening to the right person. So I think that's the case too. I think in the sports example, right? Like, if I got a player who messes up, that's life. It's going to happen. Everyone's human. If they mess up day after day, game after game, and I'm not adjusting as a coach or coaching or improving or, holding that person accountable, if I'm just tolerating that, then that's on me, right? Like what's the point? What am I even there for? So same thing in the sales environment, right? We have a bad day as a sales team. Owner goes to the manager, or VP goes to, the team lead and says, what happened? And what are we going to do about it tomorrow to fix it? I don't know. Okay. How many more days of I don't know, or let me see what I can do without it improving, are you the problem? Because you're literally not in control of anything. And yes, I have put managers on, team leads on performance improvement plans, which is, we need your branch to do this. They should be doing this. Your team should be performing. And one of the keys that I always do, though, is if I'm doing a performance improvement plan at any level, managers specifically that we're talking about, I always have a comparison. I always have these 3 other teams of reps are here, you're not, which tells me it's not recruiting, it's not training, it's not marketing, it's not the cubes, it's not the TVs in the lobby, it's not the artwork, it's not the snacks, it's not, right? I have 3 good examples, and then I have your team that's struggling. And so it's you, right? At some point I can prove. I have 3 branches, 3 different offices. 2 are doing well, 1 is not. At what point is that now the manager? Because I have examples of success. If all of them are losing and not hitting metrics, that's on me. That's not about them, because something isn't working at the higher level. But otherwise, yeah. And then same thing. If they have performance metrics, they've got to hit them. Everyone's on the same boat. And for me, the metrics are always the same. The sales reps have numbers. The team lead is an extension of those same numbers, right? Everyone's rowing in the same direction. Manager, VP, everybody's going the same direction. And we're either winning or we're not. We're in this together or not. And they're given some runway, and then they've got to make it happen. No, I agree. Hey, look, we could talk about this until the cows come home, because, how do you manage a manager who's not doing or not managing correctly? That's a mouthful to say. Well, and I think too, and I just want to throw this in because I think this is important, because I've seen this a lot. It kind of goes to what you said about put the manager on it. They did well, pulled themselves out in 2 weeks, and then hit a slump right after. Here's what I've seen. And I've never seen this work long-term, but I've seen people who needed this. I call it the permanent PIP, permanent performance improvement plan. They need to have the constant threat and pressure and or attention, and that's the way they win. I've seen reps where the instant they pass their performance improvement plan with flying colors, garbage, just in the garbage, sucks. They go 2 more weeks. Now they're in trouble again. They go on it. They succeed. They're on fire. They show up every day. They do what they need to do. They pass. Great. Good job. And it's like, you know what? We're just going to keep you permanently on the threat of termination, because that seems to work. And that's not a good long-term thing, but some people, they're not motivated enough internally. They need that pressure. No. Well, look, I think we can definitely say, I think that's a conversation for another day. I'd love to hear more about the PPIP, the Permanent Performance Improvement Plan. And also, I think another key topic for discussion is managing managers that aren't managing. That's a piece we definitely need to talk about. But look, I think for me, from where we stand today, I think we've covered a lot of key points, a lot of good tips. Is there anything else you want to kind of add as a final thought today? No, just remind everyone where we're at, where they can go, what they should be doing, where we want them to go. Check it out, guys. callcenterconfidence.com for our up and running website with everything you need to do. All our on series or series 1 on demand. All the previous 12 episodes plus today will be uploaded by the next 24 to 48 hours. And of course, not forgetting Luma, lu.ma/call center confidence to register for your live notifications. You get an email just before we go live so that you can click a link and come straight to our website and watch it directly. And of course, don't forget our LinkedIn page and Facebook page are also streaming live as well. Instagram's up and running. Podcast is coming. So much more to talk about. I'm sure we'll have some more updates for you next week. But that's it from me. Jason, thank you very much. As always, it's been an absolute pleasure. And of course, check us out, message us, let us know what you want to talk about. And thank you very much for watching for Call Center Confidence with Cutter and Catt, episode 13. We'll catch you next week.